previous video, I made a list on the top 10 worst cover songs in rock. They're awful. However, there are many more covers that are shameless, disgusting, or flat out hilarious. So this video will be an addendum to that list, with 10 terrible rock cover songs, part 2. Think of it as an addendum to the top 10 worst rock cover songs. This list, however, is not a top 10, no ranking, just a list. 10 more awful covers that should have never been made, and made me question the thought process of the groups involved. YouTube is still being harsh about playing clips longer than 4 seconds, so I can't play too much, but you can find a link to each song discussed in the video description, along with a link to the previous ranked video for the top 10 worst I made a few years ago. Please subscribe, it does help a ton, and let me know what you think is a bad rock cover song. You know how these videos work, let's get to it.
Well, I guess it would be nice if I could touch you.
Many are celebrating the resurgence of Limp Bizkit around the world, and even without new music outside of a pandemic album that was quickly forgotten, what wasn't forgotten was one of the group's breakout hits, a cover of George Michael's Faith. It's awful, and for some reason it was treated as gold by MTV. I do think this cover of Faith was a product of its time. Nu metal cover of an 80s pop rock song. Fine. I don't think it was meant to be serious. I mean, nothing Limp Bizkit does is ever serious, but when you look back at the cover, there's really no excuse for how embarrassing this all is. Somehow George Michael comes out looking better. The guitar riffs are fun, but hearing Durst whine the lyrics sounding like a creepy teenager wanting to touch a woman for the first time is definitely not how a cover should sound, or any song should sound now that I think about it. Durst was in his late 20s and sounding like he just hit puberty. Less than 3 terrible minutes with some additional obnoxious scratching, and it launched an impossibly successful career.
Showing you that door, rock on have faith.
You know who else thought this cover is terrible? George Michael. According to Wes Borland, what we've heard from George Michael's people is that he hates it and hates us for doing it. He apparently really despises it. Fred Durst versus George Michael was the music feud we never got. Garth Brooks is the rare music icon that transcends genres and reaches across several mediums, all without permanently changing his sound or material. The man has dozens of iconic hits through the decades, and The Thunder Rolls being one of the most memorable, so it stands out when All That Remains farts all over it. Auto-tuned farted all over it. As the years have gone on, All That Remains has had an elephant in the room with vocal enhancement that's blatantly obvious. So when a singer who needs vocal touch-up in production tries to cover up one of the most memorable singer-songwriter superstars in music history, it doesn't go too well. It was doomed from the start with the singing, but making this a phoned-in radio rock metalcore format somehow digs the hole even deeper for All That Remains. This cover attempted to sound aggressive and intimidating, but it just sounded like a lame cash-in from a band desperate to stay relevant. This is a cheesy cover. This cover of The Thunder Rolls did well on FM radio. Keep in mind, this is exactly what FM rock radio mostly wants across the country. No new material, not a new band, covering a famous country megastar. Perfect for broadcasting. Recently, I talked about how the Megadeth cover of Anarchy in the UK by the Sex Pistols worked out pretty well, even if the punk style and theme of fighting the British system was stripped away from it. What doesn't work well is when you take Anarchy in the UK and make it glam rock. Why does this exist? This was early 90s Motley Crue, where some of the band was starting to lose it personally, and the hits were mostly in the previous decade. I also somehow think the Sex Pistols by this point were being covered by everyone, and the Crue wanted to cash in. Unfortunately, it was not worth it. It really has that glam rock hair metal polish all over it. Vince Neil is hamming it up, the guitars are slowed down to show off a little. It's weak. It's absolute 80s cheese in the 90s, covering a punk classic. I'm not even sure they remember performing this though, so I guess that's one positive. It's hard to disrespect a band named the Sex Pistols, but somehow Motley Crue did it. So long as the band doesn't try to do this cover on their current tour, then at least it can be mostly forgotten. Please don't do the Anarchy in the UK cover on your 2024 tour. Please. Back in the pandemic days, many bands were stuck at home and decided to have fun and just make a good cover song. Something simple and that could be done to remind fans that the band was still out there. For 3 Days Grace, they tried to cover a song way out of their league and somehow made Gotye sound awful. Somebody that I used to know really was that special song that made musicians stand out with only one performance. 3 Days Grace did not understand the assignment from beginning to end by trying to make a loud post-grunge performance out of it, and by replacing Kimbra's part altogether. In the original, it's Gotye and Kimbra taking the roles of a pro heartbroken couple singing to each other. In 3 Days Grace cover, it's just Matt Walsh screaming to himself and trying to sound sinister. It misses on every possible level. I know SiriusXM Octane loved it, but I think that's just because it was 3 Days Grace, no other reason. In some manner, 3 Days Grace did make the song their own. However, they also made the song bad with stock riffs and a bunch of brooding hard rock angst. This cover just failed to connect on so many levels. Why would you sing a breakup song to yourself? And it wasn't even your song to begin with. If there was a band I would feel safe on betting could make a good cover song, I would have thought U2 could have knocked something out of the park. That's why I'm not a betting man, because against all odds and logic, U2 completely whiffed on the cover of Fortunate Son from Creedence Clearwater Revival. What happened here? I mean, U2 knows how to make a protest song even if from another part of the world than CCR, and U2 knows how to embellish and hammer in a point with a song. The lyrics and message were already done, but U2 just could not get across anything naturally in covering this. The cover of Fortunate Son is best described as sounding forced. Bono sounds awkward trying to sing in a lower register, and the music is tuned into a blues rock track. Also, there was some harmonica thrown in. The execution from beginning to end is off, and it's almost as if U2 was being held against their will to perform this. They off-putting guitar tones and Bono just being weird Bono. This is something I can't believe was released. This is the Muzak cover of Fortunate Son. When the background singers are the least awkward thing on the cover, then the cover's a disaster. You wanna be an American idiot? Green Day really is not covered that much. Over several decades of content put out by Green Day, there really aren't that many bands or artists that try to take on that material, or at least not much in the public eye. 5 Seconds of Summer decided to change that, and 5 seconds was enough to know they shouldn't have tried. Green Day really jumped out of the gate with the message an American Idiot. You could hear the focused anger and the energy through the music. It was all packaged well. 5 Seconds of Summer did not match that energy or focus and instead treated it like they were trying to impress their girlfriends, while also not playing well. Some guitars are not hitting the notes even though you can tell they're trying. The vocal delivery is flat across the board. Both on the recorded version and live versions, the lyrics are stumbled over. It's all just lame. That's a good way to describe this. Lame. Still somehow not the worst song 5 Seconds of Summer has put out, but also somehow one of the weakest Green Day covers I've ever heard. Possibly because there aren't too many out there, but still it's just lame. How does this band known for being too animated and goofy end up weak when covering American Idiot? You can't believe it either, can you? You got something to say again? I'll censor that out, buddy, don't you worry. Yeah, I make sure that you won't hear all the foul language you just said about 5 Seconds of Summer. And if you don't love me now, covering Fleetwood Mac is definitely a bold step, but that's not to say it's impossible. Covering a song like The Chain has been done several times, but I don't know if anyone has done it the way Tantric has, in the form of gut-busting butt rock with a big old solo and meant to get the lead out with its performance. I remember hearing this cover of The Chain years ago and thinking, wow, all the emotion and tension of the original track was removed. It was removed with high-polished production and a huge drum track and growling out the lyrics so that everything seems fierce and angry. It's the Midwest bar cover version. I mean it, this cover of The Chain sounds like it came out of a dirty, rundown bar. Take Fleetwood Mac and make it post-grunge. Not exactly the emotional toil Stevie, Christine, and Lindsay all went through over the years to piece together a classic, but rather an excuse for a big old guitar solo and groaning. Yay. It's not the worst cover I ever heard by a long shot, but it's also an example of, did you really need to do this? Tantric, did you really need to have this buried on your sophomore album? I don't think this helped you. Some covers really are tributes. Some of those tributes get to be performed in front of the band you are covering. It's not completely unique, but it's still a great gesture. That's where Avril Lavigne comes in. She either didn't realize how bad she was doing, or didn't understand why a cover needs effort. When Avril performed Fuel, it made me instantly appreciate Metallica's performance of Fuel for just how lethargic and nonchalant Avril was when performing. I'm not a huge Avril Lavigne fan to begin with, so I'm not the target audience, but Avril's audience this time was Metallica and Metallica fans. I do feel bad for Avril's backing band on the recorded MTV performance because you could tell they were putting in the work, but every time you hear Avril, it sounds like she's bored and just shouting the lyrics to get it all done. She barely even leaves from the microphone stand. She just stands there and groans and kind of shouts out a little bit. At some point, I don't even think she's looking up. In the MTV Icon performance, the camera occasionally pans to Kirk, who I do feel is trying to be supportive, and you can tell he doesn't know what to do for Avril though. Poor Kirk, he's a nice guy, and he deserves better than Avril Lavigne. And he deserves better than Lars, now that I think about it. Bold decision to cover and completely remake one of Eminem's most iconic tracks, Lose Yourself. Bolder to do it live at BBC One on the air. I mean, even on paper, this sounds ambitious while sounding worrisome. But once you go live, you need to commit. And boy, oh boy, did the script commit. And after it was over, they should commit to not doing it again. Take Lose Yourself, which has a big beat and a big build-up, remove those, and then add some down-tuned guitars and really loud percussion, and make it all have a touch of reggae flair in the delivery. Does it sound like I'm making all of that up? Because even though it's real, even by this definition, it doesn't sound right, but that's what the script did. It's almost as if the script is trying to channel 311 instead of Eminem. That alone is a night and day difference, but this is a hard one to sit through. You listen and realize they are putting in effort, and everything just sounds like a nightmarish alternative universe version of Lose Yourself that begs for an apocalypse. Do you want to give the script points for trying and changing the song into their own? Or do you want to sit them down and ask them if they are all right after playing live on BBC? Because that had to have been awkward after. Isn't it wild how no matter how many missteps or bad songs or idiotic things Machine Gun Kelly says, no one ever feels that bad for him? Maybe that's a little harsh, but I do feel that when the man decided to cover Aerials by System of a Down, he made his own bed of flat vocals and offbeat notes. Hard to feel bad for that. I do feel bad for the backing band that played with him, who were trying to make an acoustic track of a great song on a live set with Howard Stern that would have had instant reach. Too bad the man with the microphone could not be paid to care. If you want to see an example of a phoned-in performance by someone who is either way too much on his high horse to take it serious or too stupid to know how to make an important impression with a cover, you found it with Machine Gun Kelly. This isn't just an awful cover, but truly a terrible representation of Machine Gun Kelly at his worst as a rock star. It's as if he woke up and didn't know what vocal exercises were, or what deodorant is by the look of him. Just lifelessly singing the track and getting it over with so he can get back to talking to Howard Stern for an interview. Credit to Howard Stern for being so complimentary to MGK live and clearly acting his butt off by telling him it was good so it wasn't awkward. I think MGK would have cried if Stern would have ripped into him.
You got to do that in concert. That works.
So how bad was the acoustic cover with wretched singing? Well, just about everyone thought it was trash, including Darren, who tried his best to give a polite response, but it was clear how he felt. I don't know much about Machine Gun Kelly. It's always an honor when someone covers your song, so I can't hate the guy for giving it a shot. Can't hate a guy for trying, that's fair. That ends the list of positive statements said about Machine Gun Kelly's cover of Aerials. Woof. I also want to give credit to the SiriusXM recording crew as well as the sound engineers who were brave enough to put all of this on the internet even though they knew exactly how it would turn out. And if you're counting, that's 2 awful rock covers songs presented and distributed by SiriusXM. I do feel cover songs should still be done in rock, especially for older tracks that any music fan would know to see what spin can be done on said song. However, I do think a good think tank discussion and some feedback goes a long way before actually producing and sharing it with the world. Many bands get to the point of success that they just don't ask, would our fans actually like this, let alone people who have never heard of us? If the answer is no, then you should probably abort mission.